and welcome to today's vlogmas video. Already got the battery light flashing, so let's see if I can make it through talking about the 13 books that I've rated 5 stars this year so far. I have read 78 books so far this year and 13 of them have been 5-star reads. So in a kind of quick fire, but I know I'll get distracted and end up talking too much way, here's everything I've rated 5 stars. First up, I started the year by reading the Alex Rider series by Anthony Horowitz, and I originally owned the first 6, and then I ended up reading all the way up to book 13, which is what I want to talk about today. Book 13 is called Nightshade, and it's one of the only books in the series that I rated 5 stars. It might actually be the only book I've rated 5 stars in the series. Don't get me wrong, I still rated the series highly. They were either 3 or 4 star reads, but this one just hit different. All throughout the series, I was reading it like, I'm really not sure how this is classed as middle grade, because some of the topics and some of the things that the protagonist of Alex Rider goes through are arguably not middle grade suitable. You know, they made my heart ache a little bit, and I am well above middle grade, but I thought this book was incredibly intelligent. The kind of villain within the book is really smart, really clever, and really like properly evil, but it was really well done, absolutely open-ended for a sequel, which has now since come out, called Nightshade Returns, and it's on my list that I'd really like to read before the end of the year. But I absolutely adored this book, thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it's the book that reminds me that middle grade isn't just for middle grade. Books are designed to be enjoyed by everyone, and this is a middle grade series that absolutely does not need to be exclusively read by middle grade readers. The second book I rated 5 stars was one that I listened to on audio, but I loved so much that I picked up in physical twice this year, but we'll get to that. And it's The Bride Test by Helen Huang, which is book 2 in the series of interconnected standalones that started with The Kiss Quotient. These are a set of contemporary romance stories where one of the protagonists is autistic, and in this book we meet the cousin of the male main character from the first book, who is diagnosed autistic and understands his autism, but his grandma, I believe, decides that he needs to be married and goes off to Vietnam to find a woman. They are Vietnamese. She didn't, it makes more sense. They're a Vietnamese family, so she goes to Vietnam, finds a girl that she wants to marry to her grandson, and sets them up together, and they end up living together, and it's about her experience being a Vietnamese woman in the UK and his experience of potentially opening himself up to being romantically interested in someone. It's absolutely incredible. Again, the autism representation is absolutely fantastic, and I gobbled this up. I listened to this originally as an audiobook and it was fantastic. I bought the paperback version, and I also have the special edition hardback from Illumicrate, but we'll get to that later because there will be a reappearance of this series. The next book I rated 5 stars was actually my husband's pick from our book club. When we got married last year, we asked our guests to gift us a copy of their favourite books, so we have a little library of our favourite people's favourite books, and in an endeavour to read them all, we started a little book club where we take it in turns each month to read the books, and I read them and he doesn't. But he picked Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, which was a gift to us from his best man, our best friend Nick, and it was absolutely incredible. It reminded me how much I love sci-fi and how clever this is. I thought the world building was astonishingly incredible. I just absolutely lapped it up, to the extent that I went and bought Ready Player 2 immediately and was immensely disappointed by it, but really enjoyed Ready Player 1. But I've heard that the film is vastly different, so I haven't braved watching it yet because I'm still on the high of loving this book and I don't want the film to ruin it. Ready Player 1 is definitely a book that is really accessible for people who don't think that they're interested in sci-fi. It's a really good way to find out if you're potentially interested in sci-fi, and even though there is an element of video games about this, you don't need to be interested in video games. If anything, there's more references to 80s media than there is video games. So if that's something that sounds good to you, I thoroughly recommend giving this a go, because this isn't a book that I would have picked up of my own accord. It's one I've heard of and I've heard good things, but if we hadn't got it as part of the wedding library, I definitely wouldn't have gone out of my way to pick this up of my own accord. So I'm really glad that having our little book club has opened me up to books that I never would have chosen to read before. And then the next book on my 5-star list from this year is Returning to Helen Huang. It's the 3rd book in the series of internet-connected standalones that started with the Kiss Quotient. It's the Heart Principle. I officially rated every book in this series 5 stars. I absolutely adored this. I went off on a really long rant about this when I was filming my top 5 books of all time video the other day, so if you want a more extended version of why I absolutely adore this book, then that's the video to go watch, because I think even when edited down I ended up spending 6 minutes talking about this book, which is quite a long time. But again, I absolutely love the autism representation. This is the book that I saw the most of myself in, as someone who was still waiting to be diagnosed but didn't realise that she had autism until she was an adult. Anna's story in this is so relatable, and I absolutely adored it. Juan is just such a good male love interest. I love him so much. I love this series so much, and because of how much I love this series, I picked up all of the paperbacks this year and then went to pick up the special editions from Illumicrate. You can't see them very well because it's white text on pastel, but you have the Kiss Quotient, the Bride Test, and the Heart Principle, and these live on their own special shelf. I think it says a lot to have listened to an entire series on Audible, to then love it so much that I wanted to go and buy it in physical and then buy special editions as well. This series has absolutely taken its place in my heart, and it's why the Heart Principle has landed itself on my 6-star reads list. It's definitely one of my favourite books of all time, and I have no qualms in it's one of the definites. There's loads of books that I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this book, it might be one of my favourites, but that one, solidly there. And the next book, ironically, is also one that was on my 5-star, not my 5-star list, my top 5 books of all time, and it was a reread because I wanted to certify whether it still deserved to be one of my favourite books of all time. And it's The Innocent Story by Nikki Singer. Again, I spoke in more detail about this in my 5 favourite books video. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in that, or maybe I'll figure out how to do cards. I have a feeling it's that way, but also I have a feeling it might be that way. God knows where the cards appear. Again, I think it's middle grade because the character is a 12-year-old girl, but again, I think it covers much darker topics. It's essentially about a girl who gets caught up in a suicide bomb and comes kind of back to life, for want of a better word, as a paraspirit, which is like a ball of mist that can float into people's brains and hear their thoughts and feel their emotions. And she ends up in the brain of the guy that pulled the trigger and killed her. And it's really interesting, really well done, and I've never seen anyone talking about it, so I will talk about it until I found someone else who's read it, and even then I'll continue to talk about it because this has been one of my favourite books for probably 15 years, and I reread it this year to certify whether it still hit the same and deserved to have that status, and it absolutely does. Thoroughly recommend, though getting a copy might be quite difficult because it's not hugely popular. It's quite hard to get hold of. And then we do an absolute flip turn to a book that is incredibly controversial online, but I thoroughly enjoy. The battery in my camera just died, so if it's at a slightly different angle, I apologise. But I think what I was saying is that I'm trying not to be embarrassed about how this book is on my 5-star reads for the year, because I did enjoy it, even though a lot of people didn't enjoy it. I absolutely lapped it up, and that is It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I understand people's criticism of this book and the series in general. It Ends With Us I rated 4 stars, and I understand why some people don't like it, but personally I thought it was a fantastic take on the subject matter. The reason I rated It Ends With Us 4 stars is because the subject matter was so heavy. I couldn't enjoy it as much as your stereotypical romance, which is what this book allows itself to do. It kind of takes the concepts of the first book and absolutely maintains the severity with which they deserve to be taken seriously, but also gives it a really romantic twist and gives the main characters the ending I feel like we all craved after the first one. So I really enjoyed this, and it definitely was a reminder that just because lots of people appear to hate something on the internet doesn't mean it's bad, and doesn't mean that I won't enjoy it. And just because I enjoy it doesn't mean you'll enjoy it, and it doesn't mean anything in that regard. Talking about this book makes me nervous, and I think that's really sad. The next book I rated 5 stars is arguably one that if I reread it I probably wouldn't rate it 5 stars, because I read the following 2 books in the series and absolutely hated both of them. I think I rated both of them 2 stars maybe the third one 3 stars, I can't remember. But Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, I absolutely lapped this up. It's way too long, it's absolutely way too long, but I loved the small town romance element. I loved the protective, grumpy male main character. I thought the female main character was relatively well thought out and kind of flawed in a good way. I find if there's a character that's too perfect, it makes them really unbelievable as a character. But I really enjoyed this. I liked the kind of crimey action twist at the end, and the 2 epilogues were really sweet. But like I said, I really hated both of the sequels, partially because I feel like all of the characters that were introduced in this book just became like caricatures of themselves in the sequels. All the personality that Naomi and Knox had in this book seemed to be totally lost in the sequels, and they just became stereotypes of themselves, where Naomi became an absolutely helpless woman who couldn't do anything, and Knox just continued to be this grumpy guy that wouldn't let her out of his sight and became obnoxiously possessive. But that might just be that I don't remember this book as well as I thought I did, so I do want to reread this at some point, and it may not remain a 5-star. At the time I really enjoyed it, so I don't want to take away the joy that I felt when I read it originally either. So Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. The next book is another one that came from our wedding book club. I believe this was my husband's actually no, yeah, both of the book club books I talked about so far have been my husband's choice, but it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. I'm pretty sure Lucas chose this book because it has a swear word in the title, but either way, this is a non-fiction kind of self-help book-esque, but it doesn't feel very self-helpy. It feels very factual and helpful without being kind of wishy-washy. I absolutely adored this book. It's the kind of book where I immediately wanted to reread it, and I wanted to annotate it, I wanted to tab it, I wanted to highlight things, and it's the first book I've ever felt inclined to actually put pen to paper on, because I'm a bit precious about writing in books, even though I'm not precious about keeping the spines of books nice. Make it make sense. Maybe I'll reread this over the new year and annotate it, because I'm absolutely obsessed with this book and I really need to start applying some of the principles into my day-to-day life. And I think that book kind of kicked off a non-fiction kick, but also I was still reading from my TBR jar at that point, so when I finished a book I would pick my next title out of my TBR jar, and I think relatively quickly after finishing that one I picked out Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. And I feel a bit weird talking about this, because I remember when this book came out, and I vividly remember seeing it in Waterstones and thinking, oh well, if the author isn't talking to white people about race, then this book isn't for me. And that makes me feel like I'm showing an intrinsic part of my brain that I should probably keep hidden, but also I think it's a very autistic part of my brain that saw this binary kind of title and decided to take it very literally, when that's absolutely not the case. I found this book so insightful. I listened to it as an audiobook because there's only 6 chapters in this book, so they're very long, and I found the audiobook was much easier to engage with. But it was also the first time that I kind of co-read a book, so I listened to it and read it with my eyes at the same time. It was so insightful. I learned so much from it, and I loved the tone of voice the author used. I found it very engaging and very regimented and insightful without being patronizing or preachy. It was really well written. It really opened my eyes to how much I have to learn about the world of racism, because I am privileged enough not to experience any of it. Really enjoyed reading this one. How long have I been out of focus? Because this camera is really pissing me off now. There we go. I really enjoyed this book, and it actually kind of inspired me to read more non-fiction as well. If you have any recommendations for books that feel like this, I would absolutely love to hear them. The next book I rated 5 stars was another book club pick, but I think I chose this one partially because it's short and partially because it's a children's book, so I thought I'd be able to read it quickly. But it's The Butterfly Lion by Michael Morpurgo, which I managed to completely avoid reading when I was a child. This is arguably a book that I shouldn't have rated 5 stars because I didn't feel the emotional attachment to it that I did most of the other books that I rated 5 stars, but it's one that I recognise is really incredibly written and really will stand the test of time. And it made me think that actually if I ever have kids, I'd love to read this to them, and that's why I rated it 5 stars. It was a really sweet story. The illustrations were beautiful. Like, obviously reading adult fiction, there's not a lot of books you get with illustrations in them, though looking at what's next on my pile, that's kind of an ironic statement, but I really did enjoy reading this, and I think it will be a part of my life for a long time to come, and that's why I rated it 5 stars. Focus is gone again because it just can't seem to recognise that I'd like it to stay focused here. Don't know why it keeps changing focus. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about together because they were rereads, and they were rereads ahead of a TV adaptation that came out in, I want to say July. But I reread Heartstoppers Volume 3 and 4 ahead of Series 2 of the series coming out, and they're still 5-star reads. I absolutely adore them. I love Nick and Charlie. I love this series so much. The illustrations are incredible, and because they are graphic novels, they're so quick to read. These are books that I would recommend to my friends who aren't readers because they are so quick to read, they're so immersive, and they take hold of your heart so completely. But because they're graphic novels, they're easier to digest, they're easier to read quickly and finish. And I think one of the things that puts people off reading is the thought of finishing a book. And I think this is an easy way to get the satisfaction of finishing a book without having to put 12 to 15 hours of time in. Ironically, the next book I read was also a reread, and I also spoke about it in my top 5 books of all time video, so I'll try not to talk about it too much here. But it's Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I picked this up purely because it was popular on Bookstagram and BookTok, and I saw people non-stop talking about it when I originally read it in what I believe was 2021, but I reread this in 2023 because the film was coming out. I didn't quite finish it in time to watch the film on release day, but I think I finished it maybe a week later, and I watched the film and it was okay. I prefer the book. The film was good, and it's a good way to be able to further obsess with characters that I'm already obsessed with. I thought the casting of Alex and Henry was really, really good, but the changes they made to be able to tell the story within like a 2-hour film time frame just wasn't as enjoyable for me. So I would thoroughly recommend the book over the film, but I just love it with my whole heart. It's always about characters, it always comes back to characters, and I love these characters so much. Right, on to the last 3 books that I rated 5 stars this year so far, and the next one is another super popular BookTok one, which I picked up in June, I believe, because of the BookTok hype. And then randomly my husband decided that he wanted to read it, so he picked it up, started casually reading the first few chapters, but then when he was away on a job in Italy, he absolutely devoured it and finished like the last 3/4 of the book in maybe 2 or 3 days. So when he came home from Italy, he handed it to me and said, "You must read this immediately." And that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I really did enjoy this book. I think in hindsight I should have rated it 4 stars rather than 5 stars because I did enjoy it. I thought the world building was incredible. It was so immersive that I felt like I could dive into the pages and start my own life at Basket as a student. I did find some of the writing and the dialogue a little bit cringy, and I can see why some people that have criticised it, I can understand their criticisms, but it was a wholly immersive time. I think the world, like I said, the world building was absolutely incredible, and it's often the world building that gets people, and I understand the hype on this book so much, but a lot of it for me was that my husband enjoyed it so much and he was so involved in my reading experience, and then we read Iron Flame together as well, so the 5 stars is definitely more for the experience than the book, but I did really enjoy it. At this rate we're going to be getting the 3rd book in the series in 6 months because they rushed out Iron Flame, so they'll probably rush out book 3 as well. The next book I rated 5 stars is one that made me kick my little feet and it makes me giddy with excitement. It's Wildfire by Hannah Grace. It's the 2nd book in a series of interconnected standalones that starts with Icebreaker. Can you tell I really like interconnected standalones? It was just so sweet. I thought Aurora and Russ were just the cutest. I love them so much, and the dialogue was good, the banter was good, the romance was good, the setting was really cool. I love a camp counselor setting, and the special edition sprayed edges from the works. I think I read the whole thing in less than 48 hours because it was the kind of book that I literally couldn't stop thinking about it. I was absolutely obsessed, and the thought of doing anything else with my day, I was like, no, I can't, I need to read more of this book, I need to finish this book. And then the last book that I've rated 5 stars this year so far is one that I have already spoken about because I reread the 2 previous books in the series, and I spoke about it in my November reading wrap up. No, it wasn't my November reading wrap up, it was my last weekly reading wrap up. It's Heartstopper Volume 5. It's the newest instalment in the Heartstopper series. I absolutely ate it up. I read the whole thing in less than an hour. I love Nick and Charlie. I love the illustrations in this book. I love the storytelling. I'm absolutely obsessed. Love this book so much. That is every book I've rated 5 stars this year so far. If I have anything to add, I'll be sure to let you know. Thank you so much for watching. Please tell me about the books you've loved this year in the comments, because I love hearing other people get passionate about books as much as I do. If you've read any of these and you rated them 5 stars, let me know. If you didn't rate them 5 stars, let me know. I'd also love to hear why. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having the greatest day. That might be a bit extra. I hope you're having a really good day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another Vlogmas video. Bye!